What's going on, everybody? I have not tried this for a while, doing live reaction videos, so it should be interesting. And I've never done it since I've been using StreamYard for my live streams. So I may need your help a little bit on getting the balance right for the volume and things like that. But some folks have been asking in the chat, what videos are we going to be looking at? Well, we're going to figure that out. I'm going to take requests and we'll take a look at some things. There may be certain videos I'm already planning on doing a regular reaction to at some point in the near future. So you might be requesting some of those things. Android, thank you for the prayers. I really appreciate that. Here for years, I don't think you're the only first person in Praha that's in the stream right now. If you see my friend Vashik, he's in there too, and I believe he lives there as well. Will Donald Trump win? If I were to put my money on it right now, I would say no. But boy, a lot can happen. Because 3 weeks ago, if you would have asked me that question, I would have said absolutely he's going to win. Now I would say no. And 3 weeks from now, it could be completely different again. So who knows what's going to happen. Hello from Yorkshire. Very cool. What part of Yorkshire are you in? So yeah, if you have suggestions, requests for reactions you'd like to see me do on this live stream, throw them out there. I can tell you one thing I won't be doing, so I can save you the requests. Two channels I won't be reacting to. One is History Buffs, and the other one is Epic History TV. Those two, notoriously, I have to record a couple days in advance because I tend to get copyright claim issues on those, not by those channels, but by the content that they're putting. So Epic History TV, their music tends to get copyrighted. And then I have to do a claim to show that I have the rights to be able to do that. So it takes a couple of days. And History Buffs is the same thing because they show clips from movies and TV shows. I usually have to submit a fair use claim, and it can take anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 days for that to go through. So I can't do any of those live, unfortunately. David, excuse me. Had a little trouble clearing my throat there. History-loving pastor. Awesome. Makes two of us. And your channel's got me through some tough seasons in ministry the last 2 years. I appreciate that, and I hope things get better for you. I've been through some of those tough seasons of ministry. There's a reason why people don't always last that long in ministry. It can be tough. I'm very, very lucky that I have a situation now where I've been at a church for 8 years, and they're very cool with the fact that I basically do Sunday mornings, and that's about all I can offer at the moment because of the other things that I do. And they're super supportive, and just wonderful situation. So, get to our first reaction here in a couple of minutes. We're going to be doing some Q&A in between. So, Ricky Ticky Bobby Wobbin, great name, by the way. When will you and Mr. Beat do strip presidential trivia? I'm not doing that with him because I guarantee you that he looks way better with a shirt off than I do. I've seen his arms up close. He's jacked, and I don't think that would be fair. Tate Davis, 100%. I will visit Deadwood sometime. I want to get out to some of the sites in that part of America. I want to go to Wounded Knee. I want to go to Deadwood. I want to go to the Custer's Last Stand, the Little Bighorn Battlefield. So all of those things. What is my opinion on the John McCain presidential campaign when he ran? I think, unfortunately for him, he was the wrong guy at the wrong time for a couple of reasons. Number one, he was up against Obama, who was very popular, who was well-spoken, who was from a new generation, who hadn't run for president before on a major ticket like that. First president we've had that actually, to this day, the only president we've had that was born after 1946. So that was, working against him. McCain was a moderate at a time when the parties were becoming increasingly partisan. So he didn't have a lot of groundswell of support from conservative Republicans, which I think hurt him. I think in hindsight, the pick of Sarah Palin for his running mate probably didn't work out the way he hoped it would. So there's a lot of those things going on. Matthew, thank you for that. Would you be interested in reacting or making a video on my grandfather? Very cool. You know what? Send me an email, vloggingthroughhistory@gmail, and tell me a little bit about him, his name, his unit, things like that, so I can look into that a little more. I would definitely love to check that out. All right, let's look at a few more, and then we'll get to our first reaction. Am I excited for college football season? Yes, I am, and I'm actually, for the very first time, going to an Ohio State game. Never been to one. Been a lifelong Ohio State fan. A friend of mine, Kevin, who is a Michigan fan, he was with me on my group tour that I hosted in Germany and Austria last fall. He came to me actually a couple of weeks ago, and then Jonathan, who was another guy who was on our tour and was also on my tour in Italy. Jonathan's from the Cleveland area, and asked if we wanted to, the three of us, go together to Columbus to see the Ohio State Michigan game in November. And I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. So we're going to see that game. He just picked up the tickets for that. So I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited about the 12-team playoff. I think that's going to be a real plus moving forward, especially because I'm an Ohio State fan and we're pretty much guaranteed to always be in the top 12. Vidalio, thank you for that, from Venezuela. What do I think about the current situation in Venezuela? I haven't seen the latest. I know there's election issues going on and there's some debate about who won and some unrest. So I'm not up to date on the latest of it, but I hope it gets resolved peacefully and fairly as quickly as possible with as little loss of life or property as is possible. Shields, thank you for that. Shay, we'll answer this one, then we'll get to our first reaction video. Thank you for that. Being both a religious person and a historian, is there any difference in how you scrutinize historical text and religious text? I'm the kind of person who, it's important for me to not only have faith, because, let's face it, no matter what your faith is, whatever religion you're a part of, there is absolutely a huge element of faith. There's that element of belief in something that you can't really prove. But it's also important for me intellectually to believe in the things that are being talked about. So I'm very much into biblical archaeology, and I love when they find things that corroborate things that are in the Bible. And that's been happening a lot lately. So I think that's really cool when that happens. So I love seeing where history and religion intersect in terms of when they find, a tablet buried somewhere in the Middle East that talks about the house of David going to war with the Babylonians or the Assyrians or whoever it might be, talking about Omri and some of these other guys that were mentioned in the Old Testament. So I think that stuff's really, really cool. All right, so let's look at some ideas for some reactions that we could do. So yeah, somebody's talking about, I won't put that quote on the screen, Spotted Sharks, but yeah, Al Swearingen. Listen, my all-time favorite TV show is Justified, probably in large part because my family's from that part of Kentucky, and so it's set in an area that I'm really intimately familiar with. I'm actually planning a trip there sometime in August, and I'm going to document all of it for the channel. But that Justified, I think, is only possible because of Deadwood, because Timothy Oliphant, who plays the marshal in Deadwood, then becomes a deputy U.S. Marshal in Justified. And it's really, really cool to kind of see that. I should come and speak at Poland High School. Are you talking about Poland High School as in here in Mahoning County? Because I've spoken at Boardman, and I've spoken at Latonia and South Range and Austintown, but not Poland. I'd love to go to Poland. So, okay, so let's take a look here at some ideas. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the screen here. I'm actually just currently on Mr. Spherical's channel. It's not that I was planning on doing a reaction to him. That's just the channel that I had up at the moment. So it's funny you mentioned the Mr. Beats video on the Electoral College. He texted me a couple of weeks ago and asked if I was interested in doing a video, like a live video where we debate the Electoral College. And I told him I'd have to think about that a little bit, because I don't like the idea of getting into a strong disagreement with somebody that I have a lot of respect for and that I'm friends with. Because I can get very competitive and very heated when I start debating, and I don't want it to impact our friendship. So I haven't told him yes yet to that. Hello from Wellington Barracks in London. Very cool. Ender of Mirkwood. As a Premier League fan, American football is an enigma to me. I get that. You know, rugby's an enigma to me. Cricket is an enigma to me, mainly because I just haven't really taken the time to start to learn them. And there was a time when football, as you call it, or as we call it, soccer in the States, was an enigma to me until my kids started playing it, and then I started coaching it, and now I'm obsessed with it. And actually, we almost went today down in Columbus at the stadium where Ohio State plays. Chelsea and Man City are playing here in Ohio today. All right, so I'm just looking through some of the suggestions that you guys have been making. Going to London, any history must-sees? Oh, London's full of history must-sees. The Tower of London, the HMS Belfast, Westminster Abbey. Gosh, I mean, just anywhere on that street, Westminster, where like 10 Downing Street is and things like that. Those are, like, to me, the must-sees. I'm actually going to be back in London in September. I'm hoping to get to the Churchill War Rooms and to the Imperial War Museum, which I haven't been to yet. Oh, the British Museum, phenomenal, and plan on basically the whole day if you go there. Most overrated Civil War general, overhyped, Stonewall Jackson. Love the stash. I thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know how long it'll last because the rest doesn't grow in. The stash shows up really well because it's so much darker than everything else. So, you know, it's just as thick down here as it is right here, but it's all white. And this part doesn't grow at all. So, you know, I don't know. It'll probably last until my next haircut. So, all right. I don't think Kamala is scared to debate Trump. I'm pretty sure it's the other way around. She's a prosecutor. She's probably totally fine with debating. Have you considered reacting to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire history questions? Is there like an easy video where we could do that? Hey, Cliff, what's going on? I appreciate that. The London branch of U.S. Civil War veterans. Very cool. Mr. Beats Works Federal Laws video. I'll probably do that at some point, but it hasn't been out that long yet, so I probably will wait a little bit before I do that. Aside from the boat story and the speech shooting story, those are two of my favorites, really, for TR. What's another really good Theodore Roosevelt story? Honestly, the whole story of him in the Spanish-American War and the way that he kind of bullied his way into getting his men on a ship that was actually intended for another unit to get down there, and the way that he kind of just had no fear when he was on the battlefield. I think there's a lot of great stories from the Spanish-American War. His Amazon trip later in his life is pretty cool. Oh boy, I hear about this from my kids all the time. Skibbity toilet. Oh, it's nuts. All right, so let's pick a video that we can. I'll just mention this one, Declan. For those who haven't already heard me address this, I won't be doing a reaction to the final Checkmate Lincolnites video. A couple of days before it was released, At and Shay actually emailed me and Mr. Terry and specifically asked us not to do a reaction to that video. And while I'm under no obligation to heed his request, legally I can do it with or without his permission. My personal policy is to not do reactions to creators when they specifically ask me not to. So, okay, so let's take a look. I'm just looking at your requests here. A Lewis and Clark video reaction. Oh, let's see. What can we come up with, Lewis and Clark? Who has a good video on Lewis and Clark? Let's take a look. I guess I should share my screen so you guys can see what it is that I'm looking at here. Starve Harv, that one just came out, so I won't do that this soon. Don't seem to be a lot of great Lewis and Clark. Well, here's a decent one. I'm not familiar with this channel, but it's got 360,000 views. Weird history. That's one I know. 10 cool facts about the Lewis and Clark expedition. Maybe we'll do that one. So here's the thing, guys.
In 1800,
react to my old videos. Actually, that might be kind of interesting to take a look at one of those. So before we get into this, I'm gonna play just a real quick clip of this. I have no way to see on my own control screen how the balance is between my mic volume and the screen volume. So I'm gonna play a clip of this, and I'll have to rely on you guys to tell me how the volume level is before we get into this reaction.
1803, Thomas Jefferson bought 828,000 square miles of land from Napoleon's France.
All right, so let me know how that is and compared to my voice volume, and then I'll adjust it accordingly. I'm muted. Volume is good. All right, awesome. Okay, so let's get to a couple of quick chats that I didn't catch up to already, and then we'll do our first reaction here. Oh, we got a bunch of chats to get caught up on. Oh, my goodness. Okay, real quick, let's do this. How's it going? First time catching a live. What do I think is the most decisive battle in the Pacific Theater? Tyler, first of all, thank you for the super chat. World War II is not my wheelhouse. That's more JD's department. I see he's in the chat. He could probably answer this better than I could. He's been to some of those places in the Pacific Theater. I mean, obviously, early in the war, the battle that comes to mind would be Midway. And I think that was huge because we sank 4 Japanese carriers. And that, I think, really ramped up our ability to start going on the offensive in the Pacific Theater. So that one comes to mind, but I'm sure there are others. Let's see. Mark, thank you for that. I don't do much ancient history. Yes, I will be doing more, especially because I've got an upcoming trip to Egypt. And I guarantee you, based on other times that I've gone on trips, that when I go on a trip, I get really interested in that history. So I will definitely be doing more ancient history, especially in the build up to and the aftermath of my trip to Egypt in March. Have I seen the Kevin Burns Civil War series? Absolutely. That was what got me into the American Civil War in the first place. And I had the privilege of not only meeting Ken Burns a couple of months ago, but also getting to briefly interview him. And I really need to get that interview from the people who filmed it so I can put it up on the channel. Obviously it has its problems, but remember, it was made long before the internet existed as a thing where you could go and do research and get instant kind of verification of things. And so there's some things that are kind of maybe overstated or wrongly stated. There's some factual errors, but they're pretty minor. By and large, I really love it. Which president is the most underrated? Calvin Coolidge, James Polk, I think, come to mind. Rita, what's going on? Thank you for that, Rita. Rita and I are going to be going to Gettysburg sometime in the near future. Now that I kept putting her off, she's been wanting me to go to Gettysburg with her to be her kind of personal tour guide. If the National Park Service is watching, she's not paying me, so there's nothing wrong with it. I can be her tour guide, okay? So don't follow us around the battlefield. But I told her we had to wait until Little Round Top opened again, and it's open now, so we can go. Okay, the West Virginian, thank you for gifting those memberships. As soon as we get caught up on the super chats, we're going to start this, I promise. Joe, thank you for that. Really wish we had fair-minded, intelligent people like you in our media. I think there probably are some, but the people that most people pay attention to are the really loud, extreme voices, unfortunately. Cinema Backlog, thank you. You're from Northwest Arkansas. I have not been to the Pea Ridge Battlefield, but it definitely is on my must-do list. Caden, thank you for that. Yeah, I would love, if I can find a company that will do it, I would absolutely host a group trip to South Africa to go to places like Izan Luanda and Rorke's Drift. Holy cow, I would do that in a heartbeat if I could find a company that could host a group trip for that. Absolutely. Valiathan, Geauga County. Awesome. Right. Not far from me at all. I'm in Mahoning County. So thank you for that. All right. We're almost caught up. I promise. Any books you recommend to deeply learn about World War II? Green, thank you for that. Again, World War II, not my wheelhouse. I would defer you to, if you see the History Underground in the chat. I keep putting JD on the spot for World War II stuff because I know he knows this infinitely better than I do. There is a book I just read recently that I highly recommend. That it's more of a niche topic rather than like an overview of the entire war. Let me pull up the title for you because actually we visited the site where this happened. It was the site of a what they called the most decorated platoon of the entire war. It was this INR platoon. Intelligence and recon platoon that basically slowed down the entire offensive that led to the Battle of the Bulge by like an entire day. I'm looking for the name of it now because I've got The Longest Winter by Alex Kershaw. Fantastic book. Randy from Rome here. Thank you for that. Have I react? I won't be doing any more Lamino videos. He's another one that has unfortunately asked me not to do reactions. So no Lamino in the future. Sorry. Tweak, thank you for that. If the Germans won at the Battle of Kursk, could things really change for them? No. At that point, the war was over. I think once Stalingrad was done with and that army surrendered, the war was over for the Germans. It was just a matter of time and what it looked like. There are riots happening across the UK. I pride myself on being up to speed on things in the UK, but that's the first I'm hearing about that. So, Gunboy, I'll have to get back to you on that. Holy cow, we got a lot of chats. I'm sorry, guys. I'm trying desperately to get through these. What historical figure would you like to interview who is not a religious figure? Didn't you ask me this the last time in the last chat? Theodore Roosevelt, Queen Elizabeth I would be interesting. King George VI is another one for me. All right, 2 more and then we start. Keith, thank you for that. You've been wearing my videos out. Well, I am doing well, and please keep wearing out my videos. I appreciate that. Little Wars TV. I don't. Aren't they like miniature wargaming? I don't know how that would translate as far as a video goes, but I could take a look at it. All right, let's do this. So as far as the chat goes, I probably won't do any more answers to questions until we're done with this video. So I want to kind of do the live reaction here as we go.
Known as the Louisiana Purchase, the transaction drastically increased the size of the United States. The general.
So fun fact, I know JD's in the chat there, or he was, History Underground. We actually just went to the site. We were in New Orleans together a few weeks ago. And we actually went to the site where the signatures, the actual Louisiana Purchase Agreement happened in Paris. But where the actual transfer happened from the French government to the American government happened in this building in New Orleans, and we were actually in the room where that happened.
The public had mixed emotions about the deal. So to help win support, Jefferson ordered an expedition through the territory, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. That expedition would be led by Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Today, we're going to tell you a whole lot of cool facts about the Lewis and Clark expedition. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. Leave a comment and let us know what American history you would like to hear about.
Ugh, what the hell we sitting around yammering for? Let's go on an expedition.
The laws of the United States gave certain kinds of people certain rights and denied them to others. But once the Lewis and Clark expedition left official U.S. territory, they were free to do things as they pleased. As such, they decided that every member of the Corps would have an equal vote on every activity and decision.
So let's back up for a second. I want to look at that map because let's talk about this territory. Napoleon basically flipped it to the United States. So it had been French way back in the day. And understand that when we're talking about these jurisdictions at this time in 1803, understand that just because on paper, for example, the United States territory went all the way to the Mississippi River, it doesn't mean that the United States was in control of all that territory. huge swaths of this territory in 1803 is very much still wilderness. It's trappers and traders and a lot of Native Americans. Same is true with Louisiana territory. Same is true with the Spanish territory. But all of this that you see as Louisiana became Spanish in the aftermath of the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, as we call it in the U.S. And so that was in the 1760s. And it was only during the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon goes on the rampage and takes over parts of Spain and puts his brother in control there, that Louisiana territory goes back from being Spanish to being French. And no sooner had Napoleon acquired it than he sells it to the United States. Well, why would he do that? Because he dealt with, there was this slave revolt in Haiti, and he tried to take Haiti back, and that was a debacle. It was totally unsuccessful. And Napoleon realized he had his hands full on the continent fighting these coalitions. He couldn't possibly deal with things in North America. And so he sold Louisiana while he still had the ability to do something with Louisiana.
Decided that every member of the Corps would have an equal vote on every activity and decision. This was particularly important for the man called York, who was the only African American of the group. In the United States, he was Clark's slave, but once the Corps was free of U.S. law, York was a free man and was treated as one. He quickly became a highly valued member of the team. Sacagawea, their famous Native American guide.
A lot of times you'll hear her name pronounced Sacagawea. There's no real agreement on what her name was, how it was pronounced. And there's also a lot of debate on what happened to her afterwards. I've been to a grave site in western Wyoming that claims to be her grave, but almost certainly isn't, because it's a woman who lived for 60 years after the Lewis. No, actually, might have even been longer than 60 years after Lewis and Clark expedition, who claimed to be her, or that people claimed was her. But Sacagawea almost certainly died in the next decade or so after this.
Also got a vote and was allowed to make her own decisions. She was their expert on the terrain, and she saved the lives and property of various Corps members on more than one occasion. She was highly respected and was considered a leader among the team. The Corps was governed by kindness and respect, and no one was limited by their origin, status, or ethnicity, something that would not have been possible within the jurisdiction of the United States. Since medieval
it's important. I don't think he came right out and said it, but they didn't call themselves the Lewis and Clark expedition. Like a lot of things in history, it's something we've applied to them. It was called the Corps of Discovery. It's just like we talk about the Plantagenet dynasty in England that never called themselves Plantagenet. They called themselves the Angevins. A lot of times we apply these names retroactively.
Times, Europeans had sought a shortcut that would allow for easy transportation of people and goods from the east to the west. But until the creation of the Panama Canal in 1914, no such route existed. Sailing around Africa was slow and dangerous, and the land route across Europe and Asia was even worse. By the 19th century...
And let's not forget that there were attempts into the middle of the 19th century to find what they called the Northwest Passage, which was a sea route above Canada, and that's where you get the Franklin expedition.
Nothing had changed, and Thomas Jefferson held out hope that such a passage might be found on the west side of America. Ascertaining whether the American continent possessed a water route that led all the way to the east was high among Jefferson's priorities when he dispatched the Corps of Discovery. It's known that Jefferson was highly disappointed when he learned no such passage existed. As a consolation prize, he did enjoy many of the exotic items brought back from the journey, and he actually...
Couple things I'll say about Jefferson. Anytime Thomas Jefferson's highly disappointed, I tend to be happy. I'm not a huge Thomas Jefferson fan, but it doesn't surprise me that he enjoyed the exotic. He loved the exotic. He had a very expensive taste and was constantly in significant debt because he spent his money faster than it came in.
Actually used many of them to decorate his home. Other than Lewis and Clark themselves, the Corps' most famous member is definitely the Native American guide, Sacagawea. In fact, there are more statues of Sacagawea than any other woman from American history.
And we put her on our money. We don't put many women on our money. We've had Susan B. Anthony and Sacagawea, and I can't really think of anybody else. We need to get Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill, though.
Her reputation was well-deserved, and her guidance was absolutely key to the expedition's success. While her job was technically to be the Corps' guide, Sacagawea did so much more. She also helped identify edible and medicinal plants, as well as landmarks that made it possible to measure the distance the group was covering. But that's not all. She was also a bit of an action hero. The Corps traveled by boat as often as possible, and some of those nautical trips were incredibly dangerous. On one occasion, a boat was overturned, and important items were thrown into the river. With the river raging around her, Sacagawea leaned over the side of the boat with her free hand and rescued many of those lost items from the water. And if that's not impressive enough, she did all that while holding her own baby in her other arm. One of the items she saved that day is the famous journal of the expedition that was kept by Lewis.
Yeah, and she was a teenager, I think, at this time when all this is going down. Imagine her holding a baby with one arm and like grabbing stuff out of the water. I mean, just going on this expedition in the first place with a small child is insane.
Sacagawea's mere presence was an aid to the Corps in ways they didn't even understand at the time. Many Native American cultures did not include women in war parties, so they believed the presence of Sacagawea indicated that the Corps were peaceful travelers. Moreover, many tribal warriors would not attack the group because they traveled with a pregnant woman and later a mother and child.
That's something I hadn't considered, was the psychological impact of what that communicated to the people that they inevitably came in contact with. That a woman with a small child, and whether that was deliberate or not on the part of Lewis and Clark, it may very well have been that, because there's a lot of people they could have taken to be their guide. And I've always wondered why they would take a teenage mother to be their guide. And that makes a ton of sense.
Though well provisioned at the start of their journey, the expedition found themselves running out of supplies by the time they reached the Bitterroot Range of the Rocky Mountains. Since it was the dead of winter, there was no way to supplement their supplies by hunting and fishing. The team became so desperate at one point, they were actually reduced to eating tallow candles. The combination of the weather and the lack of food nearly killed them all, but that was actually the least of their worries. The group had no way of knowing it, but they were being watched by Nez Perce tribal scouts and warriors, who were eager to finish them off and take any belongings that might be valuable or useful. Nez Perce oral tradition holds that a woman named Wakuwais persuaded the tribe to help the strangers instead. Why? Shortly before the incident, she had been kidnapped by a rival tribe and then rescued and returned home by white men. It is said
one of those little moments in history that otherwise we would never know about, but because of the impact that it had, a woman being rescued by white men, that led to white men being seen differently by this group.
She demanded the others do them no hurt. The Lewis and Clark expedition set off into unknown territories filled with unimaginable risks and dangers. So it's pretty remarkable that by the time all was said and done, only one single member of the team died on the journey. 3 months into the trip, Sergeant Charles Floyd became ill, complaining of nausea and severe abdominal pains. He had been the first to apply for the Corps, so he was particularly well-liked by both Lewis and Clark. He was also better educated than most of the others and was in better shape. This being the case, everyone was surprised when he was the first to falter. Out on the frontier, there was little the team could do and no one else to turn to. Floyd's condition grew progressively worse. Clark stayed by his side for a whole night trying to help him, and Lewis did indeed record that on August 15th, Floyd seemed to recover a little bit. However, shortly after that, he became even more ill and finally passed away on that same day. According to Lewis, Floyd met his end with composure. Though no one knows for sure, it's believed Floyd likely died of a burst appendix. Floyd was...
No, it wasn't dysentery, Gabriel. This is before the Oregon Trail. A burst appendix. Wow, that's brutal. So that tells me that was an internal thing that couldn't have been controlled by the environment. And the fact that he's the only one tells me that they were being super careful about what they were eating, what they were drinking, where they were getting that stuff from. And again, probably Sacagawea helps with that, but these are also guys who know what they're doing. So the fact that nobody else died of any kind of illness that was common in that era tells me a lot.
Buried on a bluff overlooking the Missouri River. A red cedar marker bearing his name, title, and life dates was placed at his grave. The location was marked on one map drawn by Lewis as Floyd Bluff.
Wonder if that's known today.
Despite being only about 16 years old, Sacagawea was married to a French fur trader and was already pregnant with her first child. She was doted on by the whole Corps, who thought of her as family and had nicknamed her Janie, a name she is known to have approved of. Her labor, which occurred at a stop in North Dakota, was long and difficult, and the entire Corps waited on her like nervous fathers. Luckily, the young woman made it through and
Woman had a child in the middle of all of this. That is insane to me.
birth to a healthy baby boy who she named Jean-Baptiste, or
Yep.
John the Baptist. The child quickly acquired the name Pompey in honor of the Roman general and was soon known just as Pomp. The men of the expedition took turns babysitting Pomp and fashioning toys to entertain him. Jean-Baptiste took the whole trip with the rest of the Corps, and when the expedition ended, Sacagawea and her husband left him with Clark while they traveled to visit various native villages in North Dakota. They were all so close, Clark himself raised the child and paid for his education.
And that's actually one of the reasons why it's believed that Sacagawea died, even though there's this claim that this woman who lived in western Wyoming and is buried there was her. It's that idea that why would somebody else have raised her child unless she was no longer around to raise it?
In August of 1806, a wagon filled with findings from the first leg of the expedition arrived in Washington, D.C. It was the first and only thing that had ever been heard from the Corps since they departed, leading many to assume they had perished. Some newspapers even printed articles suggesting the team had been killed by wild animals, Native American tribes, or the elements. The Lewis and Clark expedition left its mark on American history, but it didn't leave much of a physical mark on America itself. While the members of the expedition did enjoy carving their names into trees along the way, all of those trees are now gone. This includes a famous grove near the Pacific Ocean, where every member of the Corps of Discovery was known to have left their mark.
There is,
In fact, the only remaining trace of the journey is an inscription carved by Clark into
there
what
it
is
is. I
known
was just about to mention that Clark carved his name into a rock.
as Pompey's Pillar. The pillar is a large rock formation located in Montana, which was named after, you guessed it, Sacagawea's son. While preparing for the expedition, Lewis purchased a Newfoundland puppy, whose name was unclear to scholars for over a century. How'd that happen? Well, the name only appears a single time in Lewis's journal, and at some point, it got smudged. Historians eventually decided the name read Scannon, but it was an unusual name and no one could figure out its meaning. Today, it's known that Lewis's dog was actually called Seaman, likely because his breed is known for being great swimmers and were often trained to rescue people who were drowning. Lewis reports several occasions on which Seaman saved Corps members from a watery grave.
So it's interesting how even things down to the type of dog he had with them were calculated, were thought of with the benefit to the Corps of Discovery in mind.
And at least one occasion where Lewis himself saved Seaman. Seaman was beloved by the Corps, and he was very protective of them, often acting as a watchdog. In fact, when the expedition encountered its first grizzly bear, Seaman tried to attack it. On another occasion, he chased a buffalo away from their campsite. Many of the natives encountered along the trail found the large, shaggy dog very impressive, and at least one tried to buy him. On a different occasion, a group of tribal teenagers stole the dog under cover of darkness. Lewis was so enraged, he tracked the thieves back to their village and threatened to burn the whole thing to the ground.
Dude was gonna burn the village to the ground. That's what you call scorched earth. Don't touch my dog. That's impressive.
Didn't get his dog back. Very little is known about what happened to Seaman after the expedition. However, a book published claims that
Actually, you make a really good point there, RB Ratita. Had it come to it, Seaman might have become dog meat in real life, but thankfully their situation never got that bad. Rita, you're going to have to give me the highlights at some point. Text me with everything you learn about that journal.
a well-known teacher had visited a museum where he saw a large dog collar bearing the inscription, "The greatest traveler of my species. My name is Seaman, the dog of Captain Meriwether Lewis, whom I accompanied to the Pacific Ocean through the interior of the continent of North America."
There's some really interesting moments in history where we have these animals, very often dogs, but not always, that we do learn about their essential parts in the story. You go to Gettysburg, and a lot of people know about Sally Ann Jarrett, who was the mascot of, I want to say the 11th Pennsylvania, but I could be getting that wrong. It was a Pennsylvania unit that fought north of town, and they actually put Sally Ann on their monument, and people leave dog biscuits there for her. She was killed at a later battle. You have Old Abe, which was the mascot of the 8th Wisconsin and became the inspiration for the eagle head that's on the 101st Airborne Division patch. You've got Cher-a-Me, which was the carrier pigeon that delivered the message from the Lost Battalion during World War I that got the friendly fire artillery to stop.
Lewis wasn't just a keeper of detailed journals, he was also a gifted artist. His sketches of the plants, flowers, and animals discovered by the Corps were rendered in stunning detail and described meticulously. The journals, which thanks to Sacagawea and a long line of preservationists, still exist today, are incredibly precise and extremely neat.
I'm really curious to know where that journal is now. That's something I'm going to look up. Let's take a look. The American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia holds the journals kept by Captains Lewis and Clark. Interesting. Okay. Is that something? I wonder if it's on display that people can see it.
Taken as obvious and indicates Lewis never sketched while exhausted or being swarmed by mosquitoes or bounced along in the back of a wagon. Today, these journals have been bound in leather and are kept at the American Philosophical Society in Philadelphia.
See, all I had to do was wait another 10, 20 seconds.
They can be viewed by appointment.
Viewed by appointment? I need to get to Philly anyway. Sounds like I've got an appointment to make. JD, don't you dare go and do it first. Although even if I do it first, you'll probably still get the video up before me.
A journey that lasts for 2 years is bound to make even the most seasoned frontiersman miss his family. And though most of the men were young and unmarried, many had sweethearts back home. One of the many ways the expedition members coped with being away from their loved ones was to name geographic sites along the trails after the very people they missed. Lewis carefully recorded all of these names in the maps he drew in his journals. The tradition began with the bluff and river named for aforementioned Sergeant Charles Floyd after his death and continued throughout the journey. In one particularly romantic instance, William Clark is believed to have named the Judith River after his own sweetheart, a woman named Julia Hancock. After the expedition, he proposed, and she accepted. They were married January 5th, 1808. So what do you think? Do you think you would...
So, of course, one of the sad things is the aftermath. The aftermath of these events, where in 1809, Meriwether Lewis actually, it's believed he took his own life, but he was shot twice, and there's some arguments that it was actually murder, and it's really never been confirmed one way or the other how that all went down. So let me get caught back up with the chat now. Tyler, yes, definitely some Texas history. I want to get to the San Jacinto battlefield. I want to see the USS Texas. I've only been in Houston long enough to change planes on my way to somewhere else. So I'd like to actually spend some time in that area for sure. And if I do, I'll do a meetup. Yeah. Green, thank you. You always surprise you. One day I will know as much as you are close. Hey, absolutely. Here's the thing. I have, for most of my life, benefited from the fact that I have a really, really good memory. And I tend to, if I read something once or see it on TV once, I tend to remember it. So all of that information is kind of there. And as I get older, it gets a little harder to access it. But it's not that I have somehow learned more than other people. It's just for some reason I'm able to retain it better. And that has helped a lot. And I'm obsessive about learning every day. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I'm not reading a book, watching a documentary, doing something. I absolutely learn something new in history every single day that I didn't know before, and that'll happen until the day that I die. So I would just suggest you do the same thing. DJ Renaissance, thank you for that. And Jay Lyons, thank you for becoming a member. And Donna, thank you for the super chat. I hope you feel better soon, Donna. Finally found someone who agrees with you about James Buchanan. I appreciate that. So yeah, here, I hope you feel better soon. I know that a lot of people have not been feeling well lately, and it sounds like there have been some more stuff going around, like illnesses and things like that. All right, so let's take a look at the Warsaw Uprising by Extra History. That's definitely one we'll have to do. I don't know if I'll do it on the stream. Thoughty 2's video about how the Allies tricked the Germans about D-Day. Actually, that would be kind of an interesting one to do. I do like some Thoughty 2. If I could spell right. Will I remember this comment on my deathbed? Unlikely. I don't remember every single thing. Like when I read people's comments in the chat, I don't remember all of those the next day. Although I did remember the one guy who asked me a question that he asked me in the last chat. But that actually looks really interesting, the London Underground one. But Joshua, am I surprised? I am not at all surprised by that. Thank you for the super chat. If you saw my live stream I did the afternoon that Biden announced he was dropping out, that was something that I said repeatedly in that live stream was the Democrats are going to very quickly fall in line behind Kamala Harris, and they'd probably already been working on that behind the scenes before Biden's announcement, because what they didn't need was division and a contested convention. They needed that thing nailed down, and they needed to make sure that there was solidarity as quickly as possible. So I'm not at all surprised at how quickly they rallied around Harris. That work was being done before Biden even made the decision to drop out. Tate, my best and worst airport story. Okay, that's actually really, really good. Let me think about this for a minute. I think all of my worst airport stories probably happen at JFK Airport in New York, because it is by far my least favorite airport. And because I almost always fly Delta or Air France when I go to Europe, pretty much all of my connections go through JFK, occasionally Detroit or Atlanta, but almost always JFK. And I've never in my life so consistently experienced people who seem to hate their jobs as much as the people in security at JFK. So I just constantly have bad experiences with that. That's not a specific worst airport story. Probably my worst airport stories are ones where, you know what? I'll give you, this is an airline story, and this actually happened recently. It was last year. It was August of 2023 when I was flying home from Minneapolis. I'd gone to Minneapolis to record my parts for The Great War, the documentary that just aired on the History Channel in May. So I recorded that last August in Minneapolis, and I was flying home, and there were some storms that were rolling in, and I'd flown out of Cleveland. I was coming in to land at Cleveland. We literally got to like within a half a mile of the runway and had to abort the landing. And like, it was by far the worst turbulence I've ever experienced. I mean, really serious. Like, it was probably one of the few times in my life I've been on a plane and I thought, I think we might crash. And so the wind was so bad that they aborted the landing right before we landed. They diverted us to Columbus. We got to Columbus. We got about 20 miles from the Columbus airport, and we got diverted to Pittsburgh. Now, I usually fly out of the Pittsburgh airport, but in this particular case, because the History Channel booked the flights, or the production company they booked me out of Cleveland. So Cleveland and Pittsburgh are about the same distance from my house. So now we ended up landing in Pittsburgh at like 1 a.m. But the pilot and the air crew had worked too long for that day. Their shift was over, so they couldn't fly us to Cleveland. And so if my car hadn't been in Cleveland, I could have just like taken an Uber and gone home that night. But because my car was still in Cleveland, I had to spend the night in Pittsburgh, come back to the airport. It was like 2:30 before I got to the hotel. Come back to the airport, take a 20-minute flight to Cleveland, and then drive home to the Youngstown area. So that was a brutal night. Best airport story. I'd have to think about that one a little bit. I can't think of anything that jumps out at me, but let me think about that for a bit and maybe I'll come up with something. I suggest the channel Knowledge Raiders. Songwoo Song. I'm not familiar with them. I'll have to take a look at that. Walayimuna. Thank you for that. Laser Pig. I haven't done any Laser Pig videos yet. I need to do some Laser Pig stuff. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Film Nerdy, thank you. As a Brit that lives in Stoke, that's on the Trent River, isn't it? Is that in the Midlands? Josiah Wedgwood. The anti-slavery emblem, am I not a man or a brother? I am familiar with that emblem, but I didn't realize that's who created that. So that's very cool. Riku, thank you. Finland during World War II, armchair historian. Yes, that's actually a good idea, and I will do some more armchair historian stuff. I'm very interested in Finland. I almost married a girl with a Finnish grandmother. In fact, when we were engaged, we were talking about names for children down the road, and the name we had picked out for a daughter, she would have had a Finnish middle name. Ilona was the name we had picked out because that was a family name in her family. Who do I think is going to win the Senate race? I think Sherrod Brown's going to probably win. We in Ohio tend to re-elect our incumbents in the Senate seats. We very rarely defeat an incumbent senator. Usually when we get a new senator, it's because somebody stepped down and they don't run for re-election. So I don't see any reason that will change this time around, even though I think Trump will win Ohio. Mick Binks, thank you for being a member. Come to Nantucket. Some good history there. I do need to get back to New England at some point. Do I have any plans to come to Ireland? Yes, I absolutely do. My friend Joe is getting married next May in Dublin. So I will definitely be coming then, if not sooner than that. Spark of History. Yes, Spark of History said, can I watch a video on Spark of History? We might do that. Let's get through this Thoughty 2 video first, and then we'll see where we're at from there. Let me get caught up on the chats here. Curious if I play Civilization. Yes, I do. And I will definitely be playing Civ 7 when it comes out here this year. Maybe even me and Mr. Terry will play together some because I know he likes to play it as well. Casual banter, Dayton. I need to get down to Dayton. I need to get to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and see the museum there. I've heard great things about the collection in that museum. Shay, thank you for that. Yeah, horrible histories. Actually, that's actually not a bad idea to make that like a Patreon exclusive. I like that idea a lot, and I'm going to take a picture of the screen so that I can remember that. That's how I remember things when I don't have notes in front of me to do that. Yeah, because it automatically gets blocked, so I would have to actually record it and upload it directly to Patreon. I wouldn't even be able to upload it to YouTube as a private video. It would still get blocked. But yeah, I believe I've got up to 500 hours that I can upload directly to Patreon. Hello from St. Louis. No, I haven't, but I need to. I haven't been to Grant's farm. I haven't been to the house where he died. I haven't even been to his tomb. In early September, I'm going back to New York City to film for the History Channel some more. And doing 4 more episodes of a show that's coming out this fall. I've already filmed 4 episodes, so now I'll be in 8 episodes. So that's pretty exciting. But I'm flying in the day before. They're going to fly me in a day early, so I've got a little extra time there, and I'm going to get to Grant's tomb while I'm there. Napoleon's Marshals will start next week sometime. The reason I haven't already done it is, as I said at the top of this video, Epic History TV videos, I have to film a few days in advance of when I release them, and I'm not caught up to where I can do that yet. Right now, I'm filming stuff the day that I release it. So once I get a backlog of a few videos, then I can do that, because there tend to be some issues with the music. Sometimes I have to mute the music. Sometimes I have to show that I have the rights to the music in order to be able to do it, because their channel is unique in terms of the music that they use, and I have some issues with that. So I usually have to plan in advance. Mr. Beats election videos. I've done quite a few of those, I think. Maybe not the individual election ones, but maybe I should. So yeah, I should probably do that at some point. Hello from Iowa. Very cool. What part of Iowa are you in? Green says, let's play some Risk. Well, the plan is Monday that we are supposed to be playing. It's, let's see, me, Mr. Beat, Drew Durnall, the Fat Electrician, and who am I forgetting? Oh, Mr. Terry. And Mr. Beats never played Risk before. Maybe he's played by now, but he hadn't a couple weeks ago when we were planning this. Monday's also my birthday, and my son has a scrimmage that night in Cleveland, so hopefully I'll get back in time for that. Kevin, thank you. Old Britannia's series on the other great game, Britain versus the U.S. I do want to do some more Old Britannia. I've got them written down on my list of upcoming videos that I want to do. Ryan Chapman's Origins of World War II. It's like more than an hour. See, that makes it tough for reactions, because an hour-long video ends up being like a 2-hour reaction for me, so I'd have to probably break it into bits. All right, Thoughty 2, what was the one that we said we were going to do from Thoughty 2? Let's go ahead and share the screen here. There we go. I can't remember which one it was we said we were going to do. I'll recognize it when I see it. Let's sort by popular. Maybe I'll just look at the chat. I'm hoping it'll come to me, but somebody will say which one it was if I don't remember already. I'll give you guys a minute to remind me of what it is. I don't know how much the delay is on here, but I can't remember what it is. Which video it was we said we were going to do from Thoughty 2. In the meantime, I'll do a couple more questions. CGP Gray did not ever pull the strike, but what happened was I appealed both strikes, and when you escalate the appeal process the way that I did, it gets to the place where the person who filed the copyright strike has to provide YouTube with evidence that they have taken legal action in court over the copyright violation. If they don't do that, then the copyright strike goes away if it's appealed. And so I appealed both of those, knowing he wasn't going to do that because he didn't have a case. And so they just go away on their own. Film Nerdy, thank you for that. Favorite historical biopic about a historical figure. Lincoln, definitely Lincoln. Lincoln was fantastic. Daniel Day-Lewis became Abraham Lincoln. He was perfect in that role. The Amazing Brian, going back to ancient era videos. Alexander, yeah, at some point we're definitely going to be doing some of those. Favorite historic site in North Carolina minus the Lost Colony, which I haven't been to, by the way. I was going to say Kings Mountain, but I think that's actually in South Carolina. So for me, it's actually it's a family history site. It's Wilkesboro, North Carolina. It's called the site of the Tory Oak, which is where one of my ancestors was hanged during the Revolution. And I have a piece of the tree, but that was in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Thumbnail has a skeleton in a World War II helmet. Oh, that's right. It was about the deception leading up to D-Day. I'll just look for the word day and hopefully it'll appear that way. Unless it doesn't have the word D-Day in it. Well, this is not at all helpful. It's an older one, so maybe it was called Operation something or other. Okay, perfect. Oh, so this is actually, this is the, this is about Operation Mincemeat. Okay.
Seaweed.
Yeah, that's actually a really cool story. So I was thinking that it was actually about the attempt to fool the Germans into believing that it was coming from Calais under Patton. This is actually where they were deceiving the Germans about the invasion of Sicily, not D-Day. I'm assuming that's what this is about, is fooling the Germans into thinking the attack was coming in Greece and not Sicily. Yeah, that's what it's about. Operation Mincemeat. Yep. Okay. One last look at the questions. Okay, looks like we're all caught up on all the super chats. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Empty plastic bottles, driftwood, the corpse of a Welsh tramp dressed up to look like an officer of the Royal Marines. Okay, so maybe that last one was a bit of a curveball, but that's exactly what a Spanish fisherman found near the port city of Huelva in 1943 during the Second World War. Of course,
if you haven't already seen it, there is, I think it's on Netflix, a series or a TV show about Operation Mincemeat. I don't know how historically accurate it is because I don't know the details of the real story, but
it isn't unheard of for dead soldiers to wash up on beaches in times of war, but this was no ordinary corpse. And in discovering it, the unwitting fisherman triggered the first step in a carefully orchestrated chain of events devised by the British Secret Service to fool Adolf Hitler into making a catastrophic tactical blunder.
So I'll just say this up front, and again, I'm not an expert by any means on World War II, but one of the most fascinating aspects of World War II to me is the level of the intelligence operations, not only the intelligence gathering operations through things like Bletchley Park, but the counterintelligence and the deception that went on is just incredible stuff to study and learn more about. It's hardly the only time in history that this stuff has gone on, but it was probably the height of, in a major war, how it was used, and nobody did it better than the British.
You see, by this point in the war, the tide was already beginning to turn in favor of the Allies. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 had convinced the United States to make a timely appearance on the global battlefield. The Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union was fast turning into an unmitigated disaster, and the Allies had just scored a resounding victory in the North African campaign. But for all this success, by early 1943, the Nazis and their Axis allies still controlled most of Europe.
So it's important to note as we look at this map that, at least in my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, the tide of the war has turned. It's probably no longer a question of if, but when the Germans will be defeated in Europe. And so now the question becomes not who's going to win, but what's the post-war world going to look like? And you've got Stalin over here with the Soviet Union just demanding that as soon as possible that the Western allies open up a second front, whether that's in Italy or France or Greece or wherever it is, somewhere to draw some of those German soldiers away so that he's not bearing the brunt of the ground war. The UK and the Americans and others are pouring a lot of resources into the Soviet Union, but it's still mainly Soviet blood that's being shed on the Allied side. And so the Allies are coming up with these plans. And the obvious easy choice is, of course, the soft underbelly of Europe, to invade Sicily and then work your way up through Italy. And we see that was smart because no sooner had the Allies hit the mainland of Italy than Italy's like, we're out, we're done. And it becomes a battle against the Germans on the Italian peninsula. But there's still fighting going on other places. Eventually, you're going to have not only the invasion of Normandy, but then you're also going to have the invasion in southern France. Is that Operation Anvil? I think it's called, in the southern part, landing in from the Mediterranean.
And their Axis allies still controlled most of Europe, something that was going to need to be rectified if the war was to be won. Luckily, with the North African campaign concluded, the Allies suddenly had huge numbers of troops in need of a new assignment. The only question was, what were they going to do with them? Victory in Africa had opened up a whole new angle of attack against the Axis powers, and the Allies planned to use it. There were two possible targets: Sicily, which would give the Allies a foothold in Italy and clear important shipping lanes in the Mediterranean, or Greece.
And Sicily also means striking right at the heart of Germany's only real ally in the European theater.
Allowing for a pincer movement, pressing the Germans up against the Soviets on the Eastern Front. Both options had their merits, but as far as the Allies were concerned, only one really made sense: invading Sicily. Unfortunately, Sicily was such a juicy target, hanging there like a big, ripe, strategically important plum at the end of Italy's big toe. The Axis powers were bound to anticipate the attack and concentrate their defenses accordingly. Which brings me back to our recently deceased Welsh tramp, who also happens to be the key to Operation Mincemeat.
So Steve was saying Operation Dragoon is the invasion of southern France. I looked it up while we were watching this. It was originally called Operation Anvil, the idea with the hammer and the anvil. So they changed it to Dragoon, but it was originally called Anvil.
A stroke of tactical deception so ridiculous and bizarre, the fact it actually worked surprised everyone.
Yeah, this is one of those, we did the video the other day about things that were so crazy, but they still worked. This falls into that category. And yeah, it was such a ridiculous suggestion, and there were so many ways that it could go wrong that, it was a lot. But understand, this was not the only thing the Allies were doing to convince the Germans and the Italians that the attack was coming in Greece. It was part of a larger strategy. It just happened to be one of the most successful pieces of that. But there were a lot of ways it could have gone wrong.
Not least the people who devised it. The aim of Operation Mincemeat was simple: convince Hitler, as well as fellow fascism enthusiast Benito Mussolini, and all the rest of the Axis powers, that Greece, rather than Sicily, was the ultimate destination for the Allies' troops in North Africa. But how exactly do you go about fooling the sharpest minds in the Nazi party?
And yeah, I don't know if he mentioned it or not, or if he will, but as somebody said in the chat, Ian Fleming was part of this team that came up with this plan, the guy that would later give us James Bond.
You're thinking you're going to do one thing when really you're going to do the complete opposite. Easy. You find a nice fresh corpse, dress it up to look like a British Royal Marine, shove a briefcase full of fake top-secret documents into its cold, dead hands, then drop the corpse into the ocean, wait for it to get washed up and discovered by German intelligence, and finally, hope they believe the fictional invasion plans you've planted inside the briefcase are authentic. Okay, so maybe it's not that easy. If all of this is starting to sound like something straight out of a James Bond movie, then hey, that's very perceptive of you. Operation Mincemeat was based in part on a short document of creative military deception techniques called the Trout Memo, which was circulated by a man named Admiral John Godfrey. But whilst Godfrey took all the credit for the ideas in the Trout Memo, most historians seem to agree the document was probably written by his assistant, Ian Fleming, who, after the war, would go on to write the first Bond novel. Whilst the Trout memo contained the central idea behind Operation Mincemeat, it didn't account for all the finer points of the plan.
So one of the things that, in thinking about all of this, is that this is where it's important that you have, it's a strength, but it's also a potential weakness, having a team of people rather than one or two people making a plan like this, because there are so many little details that they had to account for in order to make this convincing that it took several people. You ever been in a group of people working on a project and somebody makes a suggestion or points out a blind spot that you had, and everybody in the room's like, holy cow, I never would have thought of that, but that's brilliant. But that one person did think of it because however their brain works or however their experiences are, they were the one who came up with it. So it's good to have a team of folks who can think of, okay, we got to make sure that they're convinced this is a real guy. We've got to have all the right information there, but it can't look too obvious. It can't look like we're trying to sell this story and all this stuff. But also when you expand the number of people who are in on it, you expand the possibility of something going wrong and something getting leaked. So that's why this kind of stuff's so fascinating to me, because it's all so much on a knife's edge. It could so easily go the wrong way.
Like where to get the body, how to create a plausible identity for a man who never existed, or how to transport a corpse all the way to Spain without being murdered by Germans. Intelligence officers Charles Chumley, yes.
Played by, his name is pronounced Chumley, and that's something they talk about in the movie. He's played by Matthew McFadden, who's a phenomenal actor, who's actually just in the new Deadpool movie.
Weirdly, that is how you pronounce that. And Ewan Montagu were tasked with overcoming those little challenges. And the first thing on their checklist was to obtain a corpse for the job at hand. Not only did the corpse have to be the right age and gender, but the deceased also had to have died recently so as to be in a believable state of decomposition when discovered. Whilst plenty of young men died on a regular basis during the war, it turns out most families in mourning want their loved ones laid to rest respectfully, as opposed to dressed up in uniform and tossed into the ocean upon their tragic demise, which meant Chumley and Montagu would ideally need to find a body with no known relatives. Under normal circumstances, it might have been almost impossible to find a suitable stiff in such short notice, but this was wartime, and unlike sugar, coal, and nylon, dead bodies were one of the few commodities not in short supply. So, Chumley and Montagu made a few discreet inquiries, and before long, word of an appropriate body reached their ears. Before becoming a full-time corpse, that body had belonged to Glyndor Michael, a Welsh vagrant who'd tragically taken his own life by ingesting rat poison in an abandoned warehouse in King's Cross. Glyndor's body fit the bill perfectly, and with no family to notify of his death, it was soon at the disposal of the British Secret Service. Of course, obtaining a corpse was only the first step in the Mincemeat plan. Before it could be dropped into Spanish waters, it needed a new identity. So, Chumley and Montagu set about transforming Welsh vagrant Glyndor Michael into the fictitious Major William Martin, distinguished member of the Royal Marines. Nothing could be left to chance when attempting to deceive high-ranking Nazi officials, so their attention to detail needed to be meticulous.
And what's crazy, again, as we talk about all the things that could go wrong, is that there could be any small number of details that could tip them off, because they're super smart intelligence officials on the other side that you have to convince, because you know that in order for this to impact Nazi overall, impact the Germans' overall war plans and how they prepare for defending an invasion, it's got to go all the way up the chain, which means it's going to be seen by a lot of different eyes. And again, just like we talked about on the other side, the more eyes that look at this, the more the chances are that somebody's going to catch something that doesn't smell right. So you've got to be able to convince them of all of this stuff.
Major William Martin's name and rank were carefully chosen. He was designated the official rank of acting major, as this made him senior enough to be entrusted with top secret documents, but not prominent enough that his name or face would be known to the Germans. The surname Martin was chosen simply because it was the most common name amongst officers of the same rank.
So if you've ever seen Masters of the Air, you see when they're being questioned, these officers that are a part of the 8th Air Force, the American Air Force, Air Forces, the Germans know a lot about them. They know where they came from. They know stuff about their home lives. So that gives you the level of detail that they knew even about like mid-level officers. So there's a lot of risk here in them saying, hey, we don't know who this guy is.
As for him being a Royal Marine, that was more a case of convenience. Their uniforms were the easiest to obtain. Or at least that's what Cholmondeley and Montagu thought, until they encountered an unexpected uniform-related problem. As a high-ranking member of the Royal Marines, Major William Martin would be expected to be sporting a lovely pair of woolen underpants. Any other kind would raise suspicions. The Nazis may have counted some of the most evil men in history amongst their number, but apparently they really knew their underpants.
Underwear could have been the thing that undid this whole thing. That's amazing.
Unfortunately, such luxuries as woolen drawers were in very limited supply at the time, and no one was willing to part with theirs. But this little issue was eventually solved by another recently deceased person. A college warden by the name of Herbert Fisher, whose grieving family kindly donated a pair of his old undies to the war effort. Not only did Major William Martin need to be dressed appropriately, he also needed to have a convincing backstory. These days, someone could have whipped up a Facebook page complete with embarrassing drunken photos.
Use AI to write the whole thing, right? Now, this is the level they went to with this deception. They didn't just throw this together. They gave the guy a backstory. They gave him like letters from his sweetheart. They invented a whole life for him. But that's what you had to do.
Photos of the Major's university days in no time at all. But back then, they had to be a bit more creative. Cholmondeley and Montagu started to curate a collection of what they like to refer to as pocket litter, personal items and trinkets that would make Major Martin feel real. Things like cigarettes, postage stamps, matches, keys, receipts, and ticket stubs. The Major was even given a fictitious fiancée called Pam, who existed in the form of 2 love letters, a receipt for a diamond engagement ring, and a rather saucy photograph, well, for the time, of Pam drying herself off with a beach towel. In reality, Pam was Jean, and Jean worked just down the corridor at MI5. Of all the fake documentation needed to bring Major Martin to life, the most important and problematic was his naval ID card. The problem was, there were no photos of Glyndor Michael from his pre-rat poison days. Attempts were made to photograph the cadaver, but Michael made a terrible model. He was far too stiff. Montagu pondered over this little poser for days before realizing the solution to his problem was staring him right in the face. Literally.
Yep.
During a meeting at MI5,
like
he found himself sitting across from a man named Ronnie Reed, who, in Montagu's own words, could have been the twin brother of Glyndor Michael.
What are the odds that somebody that the guy, there's such a small number of people who know about this plan. And so that limits the number of people that those people know of that could potentially look like this guy. And there they've got somebody.
So Reed's headshot was taken and the ID card was completed. For added authenticity, Montagu then spent the next few weeks rubbing the card against his trouser leg in order to give it an authentic, worn-in look, which was all the rage for ID cards at the time. Cholmondeley and Montagu finally had everything they needed to set Operation Mincemeat into action. But as the body was dressed and readied for transportation, the pair hit another snag. this time in the form of Major Martin's military boots. To keep the body preserved, it had been kept on ice for several months. But, as I'm sure you're aware, attempting to jam a pair of standard issue military boots onto the feet of a frozen corpse is no mean feat. And try as they might, Chumley and Montagu couldn't manage it. Luckily, this little hurdle was overcome relatively easily. The pair grabbed the nearest electrical heater, plugged it in, aimed it at the corpse's feet, and forged them out until they were just soft enough to slide the boots right into place. And you thought being a spy was glamorous. With his ID card suitably worn, a saucy photograph of his fiancée in his pocket, and his military boots laced up, Glyndor Michael was now officially Major William Martin of the Royal Marines.
And the crazy part is that this is just the first step. There's a whole series of things that they have to do in terms of deception once the body is deposited. So they, once, and we're going to get to that, but there's no guarantee that, for example, the body's going to wash up on shore where they want it to. I mean, they can fairly estimate where that's going to be. And then there's no guarantee that it's going to fall into the right hands and the Germans are going to get it. There's so many things that could go wrong here.
Leaving the Secret Service to turn their attention to the next stage of the plan, delivering the body into the hands of the Nazis. Spain was chosen for the job, as it was known to be rife with German spy activity at the time, and the British knew a washed-up Royal Marine would soon have the Nazis buzzing around it like flies around, well, a dead body. But simply dropping the corpse out of a plane and into the ocean was far too risky. People tend to notice things like aeroplanes during world wars, and boats are also pretty conspicuous. This job called for something a little more covert. A submarine called the HMS Seraph. The Seraph took 10 days to complete its journey to the Spanish coastline. After a day of reconnaissance...
Think about this crew. I'm guessing that the average sailor on this crew probably wasn't aware of what their mission even was. Probably a select number of guys knew, and they only knew their small part of it. They didn't know the whole plan. They just knew they were there to deposit a body.
Since the submarine surfaced, and the body, which had been preserved inside a specially built container, was brought up to the deck and released into the ocean. It was discovered only a few hours later. News soon reached the Nazis, who were practically salivating at the prospect of having a sneaky peek inside Major William Martin's top-secret briefcase. Official procedures dictated that the Spanish authorities should have sent the briefcase straight back to the British, and they did.
Yeah, because remember that Spain is officially neutral during all this, so they're not going to be saying, oh, hey, we're going to turn this over to the Germans who are here. So if you've seen the movie, you know how this all goes down. But this was another part of the plan that had to be thought through. How are we going to get the Germans' eyes on this without them letting us know that they got their eyes on it? Because the Germans have to have seen his papers in such a way that convinces the British that they haven't seen the papers. But then the British need to be able to know whether they saw the papers. It's crazy.
But, as had been predicted,
it just became unavailable. Are you guys able to see me is the question. I paused it. It said policy violations. This is the problem with doing live streams, live stream reactions. Interesting. Interesting. We'll give it a minute and see if it comes back on. The Germans have seized the live stream. I've done them in the past. I've never had an issue before. Interesting. Oh, we're back now. All right, I'm checking in on it right now. Oh, I see we are back.
Right,
okay. Wow. So never had that happen before. I've done live reactions before, and I've done Thoughty 2 reactions before, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. And I didn't get any notification from YouTube. Normally they like send me some sort of notification if there's an issue for something like that, but I'm in here looking right now to see if they gave me any kind of notification, and there's nothing at all from YouTube saying this is why we did this or anything like that. So, all right, so we'll just wrap this up with a little more Q&A then. And then we'll get caught up on chat here on questions. Rob, thank you for that. Greetings from Cincinnati. You do 18th century reenacting. Very cool. I have not done reenacting, but I'd very much like to. If I ever get the chance, just do some hands-on stuff. It would be a lot of fun. Malik, maybe not early Islam expansion, more likely probably ancient Egypt history I'll do, because most of the places we're going relate to the kingdoms of Egypt, the BC time period. William, so Kings Mountain State Park is in South Carolina. The military park is in North Carolina. I was sure that the battlefield was in South Carolina, but I guess not. Yeah, the battlefield is in South Carolina. Let's take a look at the actual map. So there's the military park. It's definitely in South Carolina, because there's the border, and because I've been to Kings Mountain. I knew it was in South Carolina. So there you go. It's firmly in South Carolina. Cambrian Chronicles, I actually just subscribed to them today, Jammy Jam Jars, and I'll be doing some videos of theirs in the very near future, so I'll keep that one in mind, the one about the Welsh flag. Do I think JFK is overrated or underrated? Nathan, a little bit overrated. Like most people who die in their prime, we tend to make martyrs out of them, and I think inflate their importance because they died, and so we don't see how the story ended. Steven, do I do any hunting or outdoor recreation? I've never hunted. I have no problem with people who do hunt. It's just not really something I ever got into. Never really fished. I mean, I've fished here and there a few times when I was younger, like when I was in Cub Scouts and stuff, but I've camped out quite a bit. I do enjoy that. Though the older I get, the less I like to be uncomfortable when I'm sleeping. So let's get some more chats here. We'll go for a little bit longer. Hello from Canada. Your channel brought me into the world of history. Your first video was Jack the Ripper. Appreciate that, Corey. Thank you for following along. Have I ever dabbled in fictional history? I actually, when I was a kid, wrote a novel about a fictional second Civil War. I shouldn't say third, second Civil War in America, and I use a lot of the names of the people from the first Civil War. It was just something I did for fun. Elizabeth Ann, kids history books. The Liberty Kids series I've heard are very good. My kids, when they were growing up, read the what's the series? It's like about like kids who were there, like I forget exactly what they were called. It might be like I Survived. Is that what it's called? Yeah. It's the I Survived series by Lauren Tarshish. They have like I Survived the Shark Attacks of 1916. I Survived Hurricane Katrina. I Survived the Titanic. I Survived the American Revolution. Those are all really, really cool. My kids really enjoyed them growing up. I don't remember what the reason was for my second war. That was so long ago. I was a kid, and I don't know whatever happened to it that I couldn't tell you. Horrible history books. Okay, didn't know they had books as well, but that's cool to know. So what are you guys taking bets on Risk? Listen, I don't know what Fat Electrician's history is with the game Risk, but I have thousands of hours in Risk, both the board game. I have every version of the board game that has ever existed. I have played hundreds of hours on the online version of the game, which is what we're playing. I can't speak to everybody else's history with the game, and I understand that chance has a role to play, but I'm a dang good Risk player. I'm just going to say that. I used to host Risk tournaments, and I almost always won. Either me or my wife at the time, she would win. Does my county in Ohio reflect my political views? Well, it's interesting because my county is one of the ones that is undergoing a shift in what I think is a party shift that we're seeing. We go through what are called party systems, where every generation or two, the parties, like there's a shift in, I know everybody talks about the one with like the Democratic South becoming solidly Republican, but this happens all the time. Every 40 years or so, we undergo like a reshuffling of how the parties look. And people who once, like a demographic that once supported one group, for example, African Americans in the United States used to be overwhelmingly Republican. And in the 40s, 50s, 60s, that started to shift to where African Americans are like 90+% Democrat now. So those kinds of demographic changes happen constantly. And I live in one of the bluest counties in Ohio historically over my lifetime. Up until a couple of years ago, you could not get elected to anything in this county without a D next to your name. Like Republicans didn't even bother to run in most cases. But in 2020, a year in which he lost the presidential election, Donald Trump won my county. It was the first time, I think, in my lifetime, a Republican won the county that I live in, a very solidly blue county, because there's a shift happening in places like where I live, which is the Rust Belt, where like the working class, I grew up hearing, if you're middle class, you vote Democrat in Northeast Ohio. That was just it. There were no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was a single issue thing. Doesn't matter what you think about abortion, about guns, about religion, about any other topic. If you're middle class, you vote Democrat. End of story. That has started to shift where I live. Now, a lot of the middle class and even like the union voters who were solidly Democrat where I live are starting to shift. Now, there are shifts happening in other places too toward the Democrats. So it's hard to say right now about the place where I live and what it reflects, because I don't think that we even know for sure. I think in 10 years, the parties are going to look so different than they did when I first started voting as a teenager. All right, let's get caught up here. Have I watched a channel called History Squad? I don't think I have. I do have Lord of the Rings Risk. Yes, I absolutely have that one. I think it's downstairs right now in my basement. Oh man, we're talking odds now. Listen, here's the thing. here's the thing with risk. If you get like alliances going on and people make agreements behind the scenes, it doesn't matter how good you are. So much of my gameplay centers on my ability to convince other people to do things that benefit me, but they think they benefit them. I'm a big talker in Risk, and I'm very good at using diplomacy to my advantage. Not outright alliances, but at least like convincing people that you don't want to attack there. You should really attack over here. So I don't know how much that'll play into it. What's my winning strategy at Risk? I don't want to say it out loud because any of those other guys might be watching, and I don't want to give away what my plans are. But I think everybody has similar strategies for starting out anyway. Yeah, big time into, football, or as we call it in the States, soccer. We actually just went to the MLS All-Star game last week. I wear jerseys quite often on the channel. I've coached I spent about 10 years coaching soccer. My son plays on his high school team. My favorite player is Messi. Besides him, I would say my favorite player on my favorite team would be Jed Wallace. And I actually got to meet Jed Wallace when I saw my first West Brom game a couple of months ago. Well, I guess about 6 months ago. My son's favorite player, I don't know who it would be right now, but I know historically it's been Paul Pogba. And then I think it might be Mbappe now, which is interesting because Mbappe is an attacker and my son plays defense. The websites, there's a couple of different ones that I used, and I actually can't think of what they are off the top of my head. Subo. No, that's Survey Bot. It's I think it's Suno. Suno, Suno. But I do believe you can do a little bit for free, but then you have to pay if you want to do more. Brandon, I might have to bring Risk with me to Egypt. That'd take up a lot of room in my suitcase, though. That's the only problem. Plus, well, we might need something else to do because it's during Ramadan. We're going to be in Egypt, and I don't know how much drinking we'll be able to do while we're there. Underrated British monarch, George VI would definitely be in that category, I think. Henry I is solid as well. I'm a fan of Celtics practice squad. Get out of here with that. I don't want to talk about that team. Wrong Glasgow team. In what way would you want the debate to be set up? I'd have to give some thought to that. Because I do agree that it would be a super important opportunity if we did a debate on something like the Electoral College. It'd be a super important opportunity for us to be able to demonstrate what that looks like to do so in a healthy way. And it's my apprehension in actually doing the debate is my own apprehension over my ability to do that. I can get very emotional. Like I try really, really hard to project balance and nuance and respect for differing people's views. And it's my concern that I wouldn't be able to do that if I got worked up on an issue I'm passionate about that has me hesitating to do that. Because I don't want to get into something like that and do so in such a way that damages me, my friendship with Matt, or the reputation that I've tried very hard to build appropriately with the audience. So I'm a little unsure of myself in that. That's why I've hesitated to agree to that so far. So we'll go a few more minutes and then we'll wrap this up here soon. Can you briefly explain the state legislature elections for non-Americans? All right, so I think you have in the UK what you call local council elections, and that would probably be the closest thing to our state legislature elections. So we have in each state, every state does it slightly differently, but here in Ohio, we have a bicameral legislature. So much like the U.S. Congress, we have a House of Representatives, which is our state assembly, and then we have our state Senate. And each one of those are districts. And so In fact, I'll pull up a map here and show you. So let's see here. I got to go back to the other page so I can see where you guys are. Let me drag it over to the other side. All right, so here is, so this is our Ohio State Senate map, and that shows where all our districts are. So I live in Mahoning County right here. So my Senate district is made up of these three counties, Mahoning, Columbiana, and Harrison County. So we elect a Senate, and then we also have a House of Representatives. So I have a state representative and I have a state senator for our state elections. Then we also have our representatives and our senators that go to Washington for the national election, which would be more like your members of parliament who go to London and are part of parliament there, but also represent their district on the national level. And in fact, my state senator just got elected as our U.S. representative to fill the remainder of our congressman's term. So he went from being a state senator in Columbus to being a member of the House of Representatives in Washington. And he's actually married to one of my high school classmates, which is kind of cool. West Virginia has had an interesting from D to R. Yeah, absolutely. And West Virginia still, like Ohio, can tend to counter its own beliefs in that, where you've got a Democrat senator, but you also vote overwhelmingly in West Virginia for the Republicans in presidential races. Ohio, very likely to vote for Trump in this fall's presidential election, but will probably also reelect our Democrat Senator Sherrod Brown to another term in the Senate. And Ohio, that voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020 and is going to vote for Trump again in 2024, also voted to enshrine abortion rights in our Constitution, which doesn't seem to fit with an increasingly red state. But that's why every state is different. We have our kind of quirks to how we vote on things. Green, you're playing Risk right now. Awesome. I love Risk. I just absolutely love that game. I've played it so much. And I like playing the online one because, and you can get it like, I get it on my iPad and I'll play like on the plane, flying to Europe and things like that. Because then you can play all the different maps. There's like a map of France you can play, and a map of England, and a map of the United States. And it's really cool to play the different kinds of maps. Good to know. I like Messi. Awesome. Very cool. Yeah. We were hoping to see Messi play in Columbus last week for the MLS All-Star game, but he got hurt in the Copa America, so he didn't play. So I don't know if I'll ever get to see him play live. Please react to Geography Now. Okay, I'll have to check that out. I'm not familiar with that channel. React to Voices of the Past. Yes, that I think I've done a little bit of their stuff already. Celtic are the best. All right, listen, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Rangers darn near won the Europa League a couple of years ago. We were in the final. It beat all those German teams and just couldn't win that last one. But yeah, it's hard to argue that Celtic are definitely the more successful of the two squads in the last 10 years or so. A couple people have been asking me about my opinion on the riots in England. I actually, until this stream, didn't even know that was going on. More Wars of the Roses stuff. I'm always up for some Wars of the Roses stuff. I actually shot a video at the battlefield of Bosworth. I need to get that uploaded. I lost my Mac computer in London when we got there, and it's still sitting in Euston Station. I filled out a request and they still haven't sent it to me. And I had a lot of my editing work done on that. So that's why I haven't had a lot of new original content going up, because I have all of my raw files, but all the editing work I had already done, I've lost until I get that computer back. West Brom are in some trouble in England. I think they'll be okay. I think we're going to compete for promotion this year. I know we had a rough day against Birmingham City today, but that was preseason, so I'm not too worried about it. The current situation in Latin American politics. Yes, Zeta Games. I'm hoping, as I said earlier when somebody else asked me about this, I'm hoping that the Venezuela situation, number one, gets resolved peacefully, but also gets resolved correctly. And by correctly, I mean that whoever really won that election, like that it's not just resolved peacefully for the sake of peace, but that also whoever got voted in actually gets to take power there, and that all gets sorted out, because it's definitely something of concern for the whole region, but especially for the people of Venezuela. So I'm going to wrap it up right there, guys. Thank you again so much for all the love on the stream. And I apologize if I didn't get to your question. I am, as you've noticed, streaming more often, and I plan for that to continue. I'm trying to get into more of a habit of streaming as often as possible. Also going to be doing some private streams for our patrons here probably in the next week or so. I'll try to announce something for patrons and members. So we'll do some of that as well. And then hopefully Monday night, if all goes well, we'll be doing our Risk live stream, but I will announce that as soon as I know for sure the details and know for sure that that's going forward. I don't think Bashir is going to be the VP, Stephen. But yeah, you might see another Republican get elected to replace him, but I think it's going to be Shapiro is the VP. And I think we'll probably hear that in the next 24 hours or so. I wouldn't be surprised. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. And we'll see you again soon.